Color grading has the ability to enhance the feeling of what is filmed. After correcting your footage, you can enhance it with different grades to express certain emotions in your work. I always look for ways to improve my color grade in my films and workflow. Figuring out different methods to achieve certain looks and finding great tools that can impact how I work. There's no one way to get to the same end results, and Dehancer is one of those ways I've found that's a great plugin for emulating that film look many of us desire in our colors, and the features they offer are not many other plugins can say they provide. Not only is this plugin available on DaVinci Resolve, where I'll be showing you how I use it, but it's also available on Premiere Pro, Final Cut, and even as a mobile app when you want the same great features on the go. I want to say upfront, Dehancer is not sponsoring this video at all. They did reach out to see if I was interested in checking it out and giving my full honest opinion about it. I can and will say anything I want about this plugin, otherwise I wouldn't be making a video about it. And I will say I truly believe they care about making a great product to enhance your work, as they value the full honesty of those that give it a chance. In case you do want to get Dehancer, you can use my code Batista for 10% off your purchase. The only downside I'll say about Dehancer is that it does come at a pretty steep price point where it may turn many of you off, but if you are serious about color grading, you're going to want to check out this plugin. Also, in case you are not interested in every feature they offer, you can save a good amount of money if you decide to go for the light version. And if you only like certain features, for example their grain, you can buy just the grain portion or other very specific features from Dehancer you might enjoy. Now I also have another color grading guide on my channel as well, where I go deeper into my process than I will here, in case you want to check that out, since this video will focus on how I use Dehancer. This plugin is just another tool that I can use to help me express the work the way I want to, in case I want a particular look. Next up though, I am planning on making videos on how I practice cinematography, so if you're interested in that, make sure you stick around to the channel and subscribe if you're new if you enjoy the videos I put out. So how about instead of just talking about Dehancer, I show you my favorite features and how I incorporate it into my workflow. So here with this first shot, this is where we're going to end up. I found when I color grade, I still prefer to convert my log footage to Rec 709 using a phantom LUT first, or if I didn't have them, then using a color space transform instead of Dehancer's input settings. I'll disable the nodes and break it down so you see what my process was. So we'll start off here on the second node, putting on the phantom LUT, and I like the way the colors turn out with the tungsten look. Even though it says it's for the Sony a7S III, they work really great with the Sony a7 IV. So after the phantom LUT, I go back to the first node and make my exposure adjustments that I usually do, opening up the gamma gain, dropping the lift a bit, lowering the highlights, and of course I added some contrast just to, make it pop a little more, and I decided to cool it down just a bit, as you can see the difference right there. And then after our adjustments, we'll go to the fourth node where we put Dehancer. Now this is where I'll end up, but when you start off, it obviously isn't going to come close to this, but it's really easy and simple to get through and know what you want to adjust. So I'll show you here, this is what Dehancer looks like when you put it on to start out. Now we won't be needing the input, as we did that stuff before with either applying the phantom LUT or the color space transform. We'll start off with the film tab, and this is where you put on a film profile. The first one might be good right away, or you can browse over the 60 profiles you can choose from. In my case, I know for this shot, I like Kodak Vision 3 500T. From looking at their website, I already knew this is going to be one profile that I would gravitate towards. I really enjoy many of the Kodak profiles they have, including Portra 160 VC, Portra 400, 800, 500T. My favorite black and white stock is the Ilford XP2 Super 400, and there are many more profiles I probably haven't gotten to see yet, but you can really explore so much if you pick it up. Now after we pick the profile that we want, you can see that there's a push and pull slider which can mimic the way film is developed if you were overexposing or underexposing it. This plugin is even emulating the way film is developed with this push and pull slider, and it can really change up the colors for you, so you might want to mess around to see what you like. I already know for me, after experimenting, that I like to increase it by 1 by pulling it up. After that, I scroll down to the print tab. And this is where I'm going to bring back the contrast and mess around with the exposure a bit, just to bring more of that color back in. So I start out with the contrast, just pulling it and then just bring it back down so it's not too much. And then I go to the exposure and just bring it up a bit just so I have more color back in and it doesn't look too dark. Also, it feels like it's not saturated enough, and I don't want to mess with the saturation, but I want to bring in some color density in, which is a really great way to bring back some of that color that was there. And as you can see, when I enable it on and off, there's a good amount of difference as the contrast and color is brought back in. Next up, we'll scroll back up to the expand where we can mess with the black and white points. So for me, I want to drop the black points down a bit, so I'm going to increase it just a bit, just so I can add a little bit more contrast back into the shadows. And then the white points, I'm going to drop it down just to open it up a little more, as I think it's too low in the highlights and it just makes it pop. And next up, with film compression, if I enable this, you can see in the lighter parts of my skin and the highlights that it brings back some of that detail back in, and I like that. I just increased the tonal range a bit, and as you can see, I think it makes a good amount of difference and it brings back some of that detail into my skin. Now, you can mess with the film developer, but since I already used the print, expand, and film compression, I don't really think I need it, so I'm just going to pass over it. Now, next up, I'm going to look at the color head, and when I enable this, you're going to see here that I can increase the color shift in the clip. And if you want to increase more yellows or blues, you can push it a certain way. Same with magenta green and cyan and red. Now, I think this is nice just to add a little bit more of color into the image. So I'm going to push it down towards the yellow side to make it a little warmer. And I'm going to push the magenta down because I like making the blacks black and that helps with it. And I'm going to add some cyan just to balance it all out. And as you can see, it makes a slight difference, and I like the way the colors come out when I add this little bit. Now, next up, we're going to go down to halation, and it's not enabled right now, but when I enable it, you can see in some of the highlights and parts of my skin, it just adds a little bit more. Since the sun is not really out in this shot, it doesn't do too much, but the halation tool in Dehancer is really good, and I definitely recommend trying that out if you get it. I also decided to mess with the bloom, and I wasn't feeling it too much before, but then I tried it again while I was filming this, and I actually like the way they kind of smooth certain parts out of the image, and it's just a nice way to add like a pro mist filter if you weren't using it before, so you should mess with that too. So you don't necessarily need a Pro Mist filter, so this helps with that. I'm just going to drop the impact a bit as I don't want it to bloom too much, but as you can see, you can adjust certain settings. There's a lot of options for every single tab, and it's just so much you can get into. And finally, we'll get to mess with the film grain here in Dehancer. Now, I really love the way film grain works in Dehancer versus DaVinci Resolve. Resolve feels like it's just a simple overlay, but here it's much more than that. They use an algorithm to really figure out how it can work well with the footage, and it doesn't just add as a simple overlay. It feels like if you were actually shooting on film, this is how the grain would turn out. And you can even mess with the film resolution, but I didn't really dive too deep into that. Now, I feel like to start out though, the grain that they have automatically is way too much, so I just had to dial it down just a bit. I just had to mess with the shadows, midtones, and highlights to see the good amount that I want in this clip. And then after that, they have a couple more features like vignetting, of course, which it could work with this shot, but I didn't want to put it in. Now, these last couple features are really characteristics that you would see in film. Like film breath, I don't think I would use that often, but it can change the way each frame comes out, as it can change the color or different aspects of what your shot looks like. Gate weave adds a subtle motion to your clip as it emulates the way you would shoot film on an actual film camera. And then after that, you have monitor, where you can add a false color so you can see your exposure and make sure everything is well lit. And you also have a clipping indicator, just so you can see if anything was clipping, but nothing's clipping here, so it's all good. And then under output, you can decrease the total intensity that Dehancer has on your image in case you thought it was too much on your shot. They even have an ability to make a LUT out of the colors that you have on your shot in case you want to use it for a full project or anything else like that. And then in the options, you can just change the quality of Dehancer, so you can make it high but it will run slower, or normal, which is faster, as my computer is too slow, so I think I might stick with normal for now. And that's pretty much it with Dehancer on this clip. Afterwards, I just decided to add a little bit of glow so it pops a little more. You don't really need it, but these are the settings that I have right here in case you wanted to see how I came up with it. And then we go back to the third node. This was the last thing I did, and it was just adjusting the shadow color, as I felt like it was a little too blue, so I wanted to take that away in the log wheels and add a bit more yellow back in. I'm just warming up the shadows like around my eyes and maybe in other parts of the image where it was just a little too blue for my taste. You don't really need to, but I'm really picky with how my colors are. And that's pretty much it for this clip. I hope you like the colors and how they came out. I certainly do, and I can't wait to see what else I can do with Dehancer. Now here's the next shot and how it's going to end up, and when you turn off all the nodes that I have on it. Of course, in the second node, again I use Phantom LUT, and again I use Tungsten. In the first node, as you see, I just make some slight adjustments with lifting the gamma gain, lowering the lift, and all those things I usually do. Next, for nodes 3 and 4, we're going to skip those for now, as I did those after I messed with Dehancer, and I'll show you what I do after that. And now we're going to get into using Dehancer for this shot. So as you can see here, I use 500T again, and I'm going to run you through the different options, but I didn't use that many in this clip, as you don't really need to use every single tab that is available. Some shots only need a couple of things to make it look really nice, so you don't need to go crazy on every single clip. So of course, with the film profile, I went with 500T, and this is how it looks. Of course, I pulled it again as I just think the colors look nice. Maybe it's the way I shot it, but I really like the way it turns out this way. Next up, I went down to the print, and when I enable it, you can see I added back the contrast in, and I didn't mess with the exposure, but I added a little bit more color. And then after that, I went back up to expand to lower the black point and raise the whites just a little bit. Just adds a little more contrast and makes it pop just a little bit more. And then after that, I went down to the color head just to add a bit more color back from the yellow, magenta, and the cyan side. And then I went down just to add the film grain. I lowered the amount again because it was just too much to start off. And I just messed with the shadows, midtones, and highlights. And those are the settings I used in case you want to use those as well. And that's everything I did in Dehancer for this clip. Afterwards, I just used glow. And you can see the settings here. You don't need to use it, but I always like to use it. It's just a nice roundup for the shot. And now we get into the third and fourth node, where I just put some power windows to change the exposure on certain parts of the image so I pop out more versus the wall being the brightest part. And I like the way it looks right there. I can make some more adjustments if I'd like to, but that's it for now. Now for this last shot right here, it's actually from my recent short film, Dear Catherine. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend it, as it's my favorite that I've made so far. And this is the grade I ended up with, and I really do like the colors and how they came out. But I thought, why not try Dehancer and see what I can do to add more on top of it and maybe give it a different feel than what I went with in the final video. And here with Dehancer, this is how the colors look. I think it adds a really different feel to it. As you can see, the profile I used here is the Portra 160 VC. And there's many different options that you can choose from. I also really like the black and white on this shot particularly. So, it's just different ways that you can use the profiles and get different colors and feels to give out more emotion on certain shots. Whatever you're trying to go for, I think you can get using Dehancer. After I just messed with the print, I dropped down the exposure a little bit because I thought it was a little too bright. I added back a little bit more contrast, just add a little bit more pop. I also went back up to the expand and I raised the black points just a little bit and lowered the white points just to add a little bit more contrast and make it pop. I seem to always just like making things pop. I don't really know what it is, but yeah. And then afterwards, I went down to halation just to make things, I think the color and the halation gave the whole image a nice feel to it. Just gives it a subtle increase to the look. And then after, of course, I added the film grain and I just left it the way it was, the settings, how they usually come when you open up Dehancer, and I think it works with this image. And that's pretty much it with this shot. I feel like Dehancer is a great tool for you to check out, and it really gives you so much power and more capabilities to emulate film and just give, that certain feel you get when you watch movies shot on film. And that's how I use Dehancer. I'm still learning new ways to incorporate it into my workflow, but that's what I've done with this so far. I'm actually really excited to dive deeper with my colors in this plugin, and if you decide to buy Dehancer, don't forget to use my code Batista for 10% off your purchase. If you want to support me and the channel, definitely use my code to get Dehancer if you decide to purchase it, as that definitely helps out. And that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.